Medieval families kept food fresh for years while we panic when power goes out for hours. No freezers, no chemicals, just honey. They used nature's perfect preservative to keep meat and vegetables edible for decades. Ready to discover their liquid gold secrets, one honey-preserved fruits. Medieval families preserved seasonal fruits by completely submerging them in pure honey, creating natural time capsules that lasted years without spoilage. Apples, pears, and plums were carefully cleaned and placed in ceramic crocks, then covered entirely with thick honey that created airtight seals preventing oxidation. The honey's natural antibacterial properties eliminated harmful microorganisms, while its low water content prevented bacterial growth. Preserved fruits provided essential vitamins during winter scarcity, when fresh produce was impossible to obtain. Fish in honey. Medieval coastal communities developed sophisticated fish preservation techniques using honey that enabled inland transport and year-round protein availability. Fresh fish were gutted, cleaned, and packed with coarse salt to remove excess moisture before honey preservation began. The dehydrated fish were then completely immersed in heated honey that penetrated flesh while creating protective barriers against bacterial contamination. Different fish species required varying preparation methods depending on their fat content and natural preservation characteristics. 3. Honey wine. Medieval communities created fermented honey beverages using controlled fermentation techniques that transformed raw honey into alcoholic drinks with extended storage life and enhanced nutritional properties. The mead-making process began with diluting high-quality honey with clean water, then adding wild yeasts or carefully maintained starter cultures that initiated controlled fermentation processes. The fermentation created alcohol content that acted as a natural preservative while developing complex flavors that improved with aging over months or years of proper storage. Different honey varieties produced meads with distinctive characteristics. Wildflower honey created light, floral meads, while darker honeys produced rich, complex beverages suitable for special occasions and religious ceremonies. Medieval monasteries particularly valued mead production for creating ceremonial beverages used during religious festivals and for maintaining valuable liquid nutrition that could sustain communities during food shortages. The fermentation process also produced beneficial probiotics that supported digestive health and boosted immune systems during harsh winter months, when illness commonly plagued medieval populations. Mead served multiple purposes beyond simple consumption. It was used medicinally for treating various ailments, socially for celebrating important events, and economically as valuable trade goods that could be exchanged for other essential supplies. The technique enabled communities to transform seasonal honey abundance into year-round liquid nutrition that provided calories, minerals, and alcohol preservation properties essential for medieval survival and social cohesion. 4. Bread preservation. Medieval travelers and military forces preserved bread using honey-soaking techniques that transformed perishable baked goods into long-lasting portable nutrition suitable for extended journeys and campaigns. The process involved baking dense, low-moisture bread using traditional recipes, then completely saturating finished loaves with heated honey that penetrated throughout the bread structure. The honey saturation created airtight seals within bread texture while providing antimicrobial protection that prevented mold growth and bacterial contamination. During extended storage periods, different bread types required varying preservation methods. Coarse grain breads absorbed honey more effectively, while fine wheat breads needed careful preparation to achieve proper saturation levels. The preserved bread maintained nutritional value and became more digestible over time as honey enzymes broke down complex starches into simpler sugars that provided quick energy. Medieval pilgrims particularly valued honey-preserved bread for religious journeys that lasted months without reliable food sources along remote travel routes. Military commanders used these techniques to create portable rations that sustained armies during extended campaigns far from established supply lines. 5. Vegetable preservation. Medieval communities preserved root vegetables and leafy greens using honey solutions that maintained nutritional value and prevented scurvy during winter months. Fresh vegetables were selected at peak ripeness, cleaned thoroughly, and often blanched briefly to reduce moisture content. Vegetables were layered in containers with honey that created protective coatings, preventing oxidation and bacterial contamination. The honey preservation maintained essential vitamins and minerals that prevented malnutrition diseases during extended periods without fresh produce. 6. Berry conservation. Medieval foragers preserved wild berries using honeyed conservation methods that captured peak seasonal nutrition for year-round consumption. Berries were carefully selected, choosing only perfectly ripe specimens without damage that could introduce harmful bacteria. Berries were gently cleaned, then layered with honey, in sealed containers that prevented air exposure and maintained freshness. The honey's natural antimicrobial properties prevented fermentation, while preserving vitamins and antioxidants essential for maintaining health during harsh winter months. 7. Herb storage. Medieval healers and cooks preserved medicinal and culinary herbs using honey storage techniques that maintained potency and prevented deterioration of valuable plant medicines. Fresh herbs were carefully harvested at peak potency, cleaned of debris, and often dried briefly to reduce moisture content. Before honey preservation, the herbs were completely submerged in pure honey that created airtight seals, preventing oxidation while preserving active compounds, essential for medicinal effectiveness throughout harsh seasons. 8. Nut preservation. Medieval communities preserved nuts using honey coating techniques that prevented rancidity and extended storage life of these crucial fat and protein sources. Fresh nuts were carefully shelled, inspected for damage, and often lightly roasted to reduce moisture content before honey preservation began. The nuts were completely covered with heated honey that created protective barriers preventing oxidation and insect infestation that commonly destroyed nut stores during extended storage periods. 9. Dairy in honey. Dairy farmers preserved cheese and butter using honey immersion techniques that prevented spoilage and extended storage life of these valuable protein and fat sources. Fresh dairy products were carefully prepared, cheese was aged to proper consistency, while butter was thoroughly worked to remove excess moisture before honey preservation. The dairy products were completely submerged in pure honey that created airtight environments, preventing bacterial contamination and rancidity. 10. Grain storage. Medieval farmers preserved wheat, barley, and oats using honey coating methods that prevented insect infestation and moisture damage that commonly destroyed grain stores. Clean, dry grain was mixed with heated honey that created protective coatings on individual kernels, sealing out harmful pests and preventing moisture absorption that caused rotting. The honey-coated grain was stored in sealed containers that maintained freshness while preventing rodent access to valuable food supplies. 11. Meat storage. Medieval families preserved beef, pork, and venison using honey storage methods that created long-lasting protein reserves essential for survival during harsh seasons. Large cuts of meat were sectioned into manageable portions, then treated with salt to remove moisture before honey preservation. The meat was completely submerged in heated honey within large ceramic crocks that provided airtight storage environments. Honey's natural preservative properties prevented bacterial growth while maintaining nutritional content for months. 12. Mushroom storage. Medieval foragers preserved wild mushrooms using honey immersion techniques that maintained nutritional value and prevented the rapid decomposition that typically made mushroom storage impossible without modern preservation methods. The process required expert knowledge of mushroom identification and careful selection of only the safest edible varieties. As preservation could not eliminate toxins from poisonous species that could cause death if consumed, fresh mushrooms were carefully cleaned of dirt and debris, then blanched briefly in boiling water to reduce moisture content and eliminate potential harmful bacteria. Before honey preservation began, the prepared mushrooms were completely submerged in pure honey within sealed ceramic containers that prevented air exposure and maintained freshness throughout extended storage periods. Different mushroom varieties required specific preparation techniques. Dense mushrooms like porcini could be preserved whole, while delicate varieties needed careful handling to prevent texture damage during processing. Medieval monasteries particularly valued preserved mushrooms for providing protein-rich nutrition during religious fasting periods when meat consumption was forbidden, but mushroom protein remained acceptable for maintaining health. The technique enabled forest communities to capitalize on brief mushroom seasons that occurred only during specific weather conditions, creating valuable food stores from temporary natural abundance. Preserved mushrooms retained essential amino acids and minerals crucial for maintaining strength during harsh winter months when fresh foraging was impossible due to frozen ground conditions. 13. Conservation. Medieval farmers preserved vegetable and herb seeds using honey coating techniques that maintained viability and prevented insect damage that commonly destroyed seed stores, essential for future crop production. The process involved carefully selecting the best seeds from successful harvests, ensuring only the healthiest specimens were chosen for preservation to guarantee strong germination rates in following growing seasons. Seeds were thoroughly dried to remove excess moisture, then coated with thin layers of heated honey that created protective barriers against moisture absorption and pest infestation while maintaining seed dormancy necessary for proper germination. Different seed varieties required specific preservation methods. Large seeds like beans needed minimal honey coating, while tiny herb seeds required careful handling to prevent damage during preservation processing. The honey coating preserved seed viability for years, enabling farmers to create comprehensive seed banks that could sustain agricultural production through multiple seasons of crop failures or adverse growing conditions. Medieval monasteries particularly valued preserved seeds for maintaining medicinal herb gardens that provided essential healing plants throughout religious communities. The technique enabled farming communities to preserve genetic diversity by maintaining multiple varieties of important crops, ensuring agricultural resilience against diseases and environmental challenges. Preserved seeds served as valuable trade goods that could be exchanged between communities for acquiring new crop varieties and improving local agricultural capabilities through genetic diversity enhancement. 14. Poultry preservation. Medieval households preserved chickens, ducks, and game birds using honey immersion techniques that maintained meat quality for extended periods without refrigeration. Birds were plucked, cleaned, and often cut into portions that fit preservation containers more efficiently. Salt curing preceded honey preservation, drawing moisture from meat while creating conditions hostile to harmful bacteria completely. Cleaned birds were submerged in pure honey within sealed ceramic vessels that prevented air exposure and contamination. 15. Emergency rations. Medieval communities created comprehensive emergency food stores using honey preservation techniques that combined multiple preserved foods into complete nutritional packages capable of sustaining populations through extended crises, including famines, sieges, and natural disasters. These emergency rations typically included honey-preserved meats, vegetables, grains, and fruits, carefully balanced to provide complete nutrition, including proteins, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, and minerals essential for maintaining health during survival situations. The preparation process required extensive planning and resource allocation, with communities dedicating significant portions of seasonal abundance to creating these crucial survival reserves that could determine life or death during catastrophic events. Different preservation combinations were designed for specific emergency scenarios. Siege rations emphasized compact, high-energy foods, while famine stores focused on volume and nutritional completeness to sustain larger populations for extended periods. During extended campaigns without reliable supply lines or foraging opportunities in hostile territories, the honey preservation maintained food, regardless of changing storage conditions or environmental challenges. These emergency stores often represented the difference between community survival and complete population loss during the frequent crises that characterized medieval life, making honey preservation techniques absolutely crucial for civilizational continuity and human survival. Modern and ancient food preservation. Medieval honey preservation techniques demonstrate remarkable sophistication that modern food science has validated through understanding of honey's unique antimicrobial and preservation properties. Acidic pH and natural hydrogen peroxide production create environments hostile to harmful bacteria while maintaining food quality and nutritional value over extended periods. Modern analysis reveals that honey contains enzymes, antioxidants, and antimicrobial compounds that actively prevent spoilage through multiple biological mechanisms that ancient peoples understood empirically through generations of practical Contemporary food preservation relies heavily on artificial additives, chemical preservatives, and energy-intensive processes like refrigeration and freezing that were unavailable to medieval populations. However, modern research increasingly validates traditional honey preservation methods as superior alternatives that provide natural preservation without harmful chemicals or environmental costs associated with industrial food processing. The resurgence of interest in traditional preservation techniques reflects growing awareness that ancient methods often achieved better results with fewer resources and environmental impact. Medieval honey preservation enabled complete food security, systems that sustained entire civilizations. Through regular crises that would devastate modern populations dependent on complex supply chains and industrial agriculture, these traditional techniques created resilient food systems that functioned reliably for centuries without external inputs or technological support, demonstrating sustainability principles that modern society is beginning to rediscover through necessity. The comparison reveals that medieval preservation wisdom offers valuable lessons for contemporary food security challenges, emergency preparedness, and sustainable living practices. Ancient techniques prove that sophisticated food preservation is possible using natural materials and traditional knowledge, providing alternatives to industrial methods that often compromise nutrition and environmental health while creating dangerous dependencies on complex technological systems. Medieval honey preservation techniques reveal profound wisdom about food security, natural preservation, and sustainable living that remains incredibly relevant for modern challenges. These ancient methods demonstrate that sophisticated food preservation is possible, using renewable natural materials and traditional knowledge passed down through generations of practical experience. The techniques created resilient food systems that sustained entire civilizations through regular crises, without external technological support or industrial infrastructure. Key lessons include the importance of working with natural processes rather than against them. Understanding that traditional knowledge often contains scientific principles we're only beginning to appreciate, and recognizing that food security depends more on wisdom and preparation than on complex technology. Medieval preservation methods offer practical alternatives for emergency preparedness, sustainable living, and reducing dependence on industrial food systems that compromise nutrition and environmental health. These time-tested techniques prove that ancient wisdom can solve modern problems. Subscribe to discover more traditional knowledge that could revolutionize your approach to food security, emergency preparedness, and sustainable living in an uncertain world.